So hello there and welcome to today's art class. Today we're painting a beautiful little deer face. Now my printer decided not to play today, so I've got my deer face here on my iPad. And if you have the notes printed out or on the screen in front of you, then that's also a great reference point because you've got both a black and white version and a colour version there to refer to. And then if you have another screen like I've got here, if you pop it onto your screen, then you can zoom in and get really close to the image and see the details. And it just makes it a lot easier sometimes to see. So I hope you enjoy today's class. I chose a deer face because all my students are very dear to me. And I thought that was quite a nice way to end our online classes for now. You never know, they might come back. We'll see how we go. So bear with me while I share my screen. I've just got to connect it up to my iPad, which is looking down onto my table. I've just got to press a few buttons and hopefully it will behave itself. 9 times out of 10, we're lucky. So I've just got to, there we go, lovely. This is one of those times, joy. Okay. So there you can see the table that I'm working on today, and I've got my art diary just there. And we're going to do a little charcoal sketch to begin with today. I'll just adjust the focus so that it doesn't keep moving around too much. There we go. So that should be fixed now. And if the focus or anything starts playing up or you can't hear me, please let me know, because then I can try and make some adjustments at this end. Okay, so what you'll need is an art diary like this or a bit of drawing paper, anything just to do a little bit of sketching onto. The other thing I have is some charcoal sticks. This is willow charcoal. It's a Montmartre brand, which is a pretty nice little budget brand. Don't buy pastels in that brand. They're not the best, but for willow charcoal and pencils and rulers and stuff like that, they're pretty good. So this willow charcoal is quite soft, and in these little boxes or sets, you'll find they have foil on the end so that it keeps your fingers clean. But what happens is I tend to break off half of them and then I just don't use the foil bits because then I've got to peel it off, which is a nuisance sometimes. I like to have nearby, I like to have a shorter, fatter piece. So you'll find you'll get different widths in here, different sized pieces. And then I like to have a longer piece that I can draw finer lines with. I know that doesn't look much fatter. It used to be. I've used it a fair bit. Just trying to find a little chunky bit in here that would serve me, but there's one. So as I said, peeling the foil off is quite annoying sometimes. You need to, sit down for an hour and just do all of them in one go. But that's there to protect your fingers. Okay, so I've got 2 pieces of charcoal there. First thing we're going to do is draw up the black and white version. So if you've got your notes there in front of you, you should be able to see a little black and white image of the deer face. And that is to give you an idea of the range of tones in the picture today. So when we do it in charcoal, we can just really focus on the lights and the darks and all the mid-tones because they come in into play with colour as well. So they're very important when you're choosing your colours. So knowledge and understanding of tone is really vital to get a really eye-catching image that's going to have a little bit of pop about it and a lovely range of lights and darks. So you can see here on my page, I've drawn up the shape of today's image. So we're working in landscape today. And on your larger image, you will have a grid. So what I've done on the grid, because I haven't got my notes here, there we are. I'm just going to look at them online for now. So I've got a line down the center and another one across the middle there. And you can see I'm not terribly precise at this point. I probably actually need to lower that one across the middle. So you just need to get your center lines drawn in. And then I've broken each quarter into half again, just to break this up into smaller segments. You'll find if you're learning to draw, this is one of the ways that you could learn to draw, and it's called the grid method. So this is a grid, And what you do is you draw a grid onto your reference picture or onto the scene that you're painting, and then you can literally break it up into like a jigsaw puzzle and do pieces of it in each segment. And it just helps to detach your brain from seeing an image, in this case a deer, and break it down into shapes and tones rather than what it is. And that is often, I find for me anyway, is a really good way to draw something up, because you become detached from it then and you just start to see it for what it really is. And it really helps with your art if you see things in shapes and tones. So let's have a look at this image. We'll start at the top left-hand segment. I was going to say quarter, but they're smaller than quarters, eighths, call it an eighth. So in this top segment, in the image, you can see that it's mostly just blur because it's the background or the back of the deer. What we have, if you look at the black and white version, is a dark section up in this top corner here. So see there's a little arch shape, that will be the back of the deer, and then behind the deer, or continuing on, is this darker colour. And you can see that much more clearly in the black and white version than you can in the colour version. Okay. And then coming forward, it's still a mid-grey colour, so it's not, definitely not light. It's kind of all these little mid-tones. And as we get in towards the next segment to the right, it gets a little bit lighter. So just shade that area gently with your charcoal. Just shade it like that. It doesn't have to be too precise. We're really just looking at shapes and tone at the moment, or value. So you might have heard it called value before. That's usually the American term for it. Or we here in Australia say tone, but tone and value mean the same thing basically. So the value is the value of darkness of those areas that we're looking at. So I've just lightly shaded that in there. Then as you move across into the next segment on the right, can you see how the ear, or the shape of the ear, comes down, and then we go down into the face and we have the eye and the side of the eye, or just underneath the eye in that part there. So that we're just looking at this little segment here. So just don't look at anything else, cover up the rest of it if that makes it easier for you. Now, the other way we could look at this is to look at the negative space, or the negative shape, and that's the shape around the head. So for instance, rather than trying to look at the ear and draw the shape of the ear, I can look at the shape around it. So that is this shape in here. So if I draw this in here, what I'm looking at is the negative shape. That's the space behind the actual face and the eye. And I can look at that and draw in that shape without being attached to the outcome. So if I'm looking at it closely, this is kind of the shape that I'm seeing. See this shape here, and then we've got an angle down there, and then we've got it coming out there. Then we have little eyelashes, which we can put in later. The roundness of the eyeball here, and then it pops out again and goes down into the cheek. So what you can look at is this shape here rather than that shape there. Does that make sense? Sometimes it's easier to look at the negative space because you just get a much cleaner kind of shape. And again, you can be a little more detached from what you're actually painting. So shade that in lightly, and where you want it to be a little bit lighter. So if you notice on the image, it's a little bit lighter just around this section here where the eye is. And what makes the eye pop is the darker tone behind it, okay? So because the the lighter tone, wrong way around. Because the eye is dark, we've got this beautiful dark eyeball there, then the light behind that dark eye will make it come forward and pop. And that's how you can create drama in your art, by bringing the lights and the darks together and making them work together. So having an understanding of how to make something lighter is often by putting a darker thing next to it, and vice versa, will really help you with your art. So while we're there, we may as well look at the shape of the eye. So it comes down like this. It's not a round eye. Well, it is a round eye, but the shape that we can see in this particular picture is more like this, isn't it? So then just colour that in nice and dark. So you've got that lovely dark eyeball up against that lovely light-ish background. And then we've also got a little line between the ear and the top of the head. So I probably should have come over a bit further there actually. So this is when you start to put a bit more detail in, is when you notice, oh, that's a little too wide or a little too narrow, and you can kind of just move your lines around a little bit. Charcoal's lovely for that because it gives you the freedom to move things around. And if you have a kneadable eraser like this one, then you can pull a little piece off and just use that to erase parts of it as you go if you need to clean up. Okay, so then we've got this line down through here. We've got the bottom of the ear, and that comes up on an angle like that where it kind of joins onto the head. And then we've got this lovely little shape up the top here inside the ear. So it's a little darker in through here. And again, looking at your black and white version, you'll see that much more clearly than you will with the colour. Because we've got so much colour in there, it's difficult sometimes to see what tone the colour is. So that's why it's a really good idea when you do have a reference picture, if you can have a version of it in black and white, then that will really help you to find the darks and the lights. Okay, so I've just continued that line of the ear up into this segment here, and you can see then it's much darker on this part of the ear, so there's a bit of shadow happening through there. And then we've got all this lovely light fur coming out through there. So when you want white with charcoal, just leave the paper uncoloured, or use your eraser to get your whites back in to make it white again. Okay, so I know I haven't put the detail in the eye and all that stuff just yet, but we're just really looking at shapes at the moment. And look at the tear duct area of the eye. See the shape of that it comes down through here and then comes up and then off again under that eyeball. And then, of course, that's a much lighter tone in through there. We've got some fur in there. And again, looking at the black and white image, you can see that it's sort of slightly darker around the tear duct area. And then the fur or the hair is a light around the eye, isn't it? We've got this lovely light or nearly white sort of hair. And then if I want to put in a few of the little eyelashes, just lightly put in some of those, and we'll pop some white in to the eyeball in a minute. And we'll do that using the kneadable eraser. So that will be just taking off some of that little bits of charcoal with your eraser. So see how the image that I'm drawing here really doesn't look anything like a deer. It's just shapes and tones. And they're the things that are really important to take note of at this point. Okay? Because when you draw this up in pastel, we'll be doing a very similar thing, but we'll be using colour to illustrate the tones and the lights and the darks. And then we'll work on the detail towards the end. But if you want to pop your white into your little eye, you can just use your kneadable eraser. Again, just knead it, push it around until you get a little tip or a point on there to try and get some of the whites back into your eye. Might take a few goes to get some of the charcoal off there. The other cool thing you can always do is use a charcoal pencil. You can get them in white. So if this works, it might not, but if you wanted to get some nice, strong white in there, you can always use a little charcoal pencil. So that'll give you those little highlights, which is what brings eyes to life. Okay, but we'll carry on because I just want to get onto the colour version as quickly as we can. So let's move across to the top of the head, and that comes across into this area here. So you can see the shape of that within the grid line. And the way the grid is really helpful is that you can just measure with your eye or even with a ruler, how far down does the ear begin in relation to your grid lines. So you can often do it like a join the dots kind of thing with the grid and, you know, mark where things crisscross or intersect, and then you can kind of join the dots and get your picture in the right place. It's really difficult sometimes to get the picture in the right spot. So if you look at this grid area here, this is all forehead, isn't it, of the deer? There's actually no other information in there other than fur and tone. So I'm just going to gently, with my short chunky bit of charcoal, just lightly fill that in with a bit of charcoal just to get some tone in there. And you'll see down the center it's a little darker. So we've got this darker sort of section just there, but that's all fur basically. And if you wanted to, you could do some little furry marks with your charcoal just to indicate the texture that we've got happening in there. But for now, let's just focus on the shading. Okay, so that's that segment there. Then if we move across into the right-hand far segment, see we've got some very definite shapes there. And again, you can look at your negative space. So if I look at the negative space, that's the area above the deer's head. See the shape of that? So we come down and then we come up, and the ear comes out of off to the page about there on your line. So I can just draw this shape down, and that there behind the deer, so this grey sort of area in here is the negative space. So by looking at that, you can find your shapes quite easily. So once you've got that in place, then we want to look at the rest of the information in this segment. So the ear and the head join at about halfway down inside this segment. It's about the halfway mark, around about there, I think. And it comes down to here, and then we come across and we're back into the eye. But this eye, most of this eye, actually sits down inside the next segment below here. So we've just got the top of the eye there. I've come in too high, so I can take that out again. So the ear comes down, and then we come across, and then we have the eyelid coming down like that, and it comes across like that. And you can see the top of the eyelid comes across down into this segment here. So we've got this lovely angle coming down through there. And then we've got these lovely little eyelashes coming out of there as well. We won't worry about the eyeball yet. We need to finish off in this segment first. So just finishing off the shape of the ear underneath there. And again, we have negative space in this area here underneath the ear. So you could then again look at the shape above your grid mark to find that negative space. And doing that, I've just realized I've gone down too low. So I need it to come up a little bit higher, come across here, and then into the ear there. So that's around about where the ear needs to sit in relation to the head. And now we've got those basic lines marked in, we can just continue with a bit of shading, looking at your lights and your darks again, and your shadows. You can see on this ear also, we have a lovely dark section as it folds in on itself around the top of the ear there. And then there's a little bit of a dark section through the middle, which is quite kind of a pinky colour. And then we've got a bit of dark down here. Okay, again, looking at your black and white version to see the lights and the darks. And then the head is sort of a mid-tone, and then above the eye area is light again, which it is on the other side too. I've kind of left it a bit too dark over there. You can come back again with the eraser and make sure you keep that fairly light. Okay, so that's the eye, or that segment, I should say. So we've done the top half basically of the head of the deer picture. So now let's move down, and we might keep going over here on the right-hand side and continue on through there. So when you look at the right-hand, this bottom right-hand segment, the only part of the deer that's in that part is the eyeball, really, and a little bit of the cheek. And then the rest of the deer face goes over into the next segment on your grid. So that's really good, isn't it? Because now we can find the eyeball in there, and we just know that it sits just at the top here in the corner where the grid intersects, and then we have a little cheekbone or cheek shape coming down through there, and that's basically where the eye is. And the whole eye sits on this right-hand side of this grid line here. So just noticing things like that really helps to get everything in the right spot. So I can fill that in nice and dark now, come back in with the eraser afterwards if you want to, and put a bit of light back in there. But we've now got our eyes in the right place, and that's really important, especially when you're doing faces, because then everything needs to kind of line up. And this little deer face is on an angle, so it's not looking at, it is looking at us straight on, but the photo's been taken on a slight angle, so it's not up and down, you know, straight. It's on a slight angle. So having the grid really helps us get that the eyes in the in the right place. And you can put a few little bits of hair and things in there if you want to do all that stuff. All the little bits of detail. They're the bits that we usually do at the end when we're doing pastels. And again, you can look at the negative space or the space around the deer face to determine the shapes that are going on there too. So all this area here is kind of a mottly grey sort of background area. You can leave that undone or you can fill it in, whatever you wish to do. So now we've got both the eyes and the top of the head and the ears in there. We need to move across and start working in this segment here. So in this segment, there's a lot of face, or nose, I should say. We've got quite a lot of the nose and the front of the head. So again, looking at the shape and noticing that as we get to this grid line here, we've got this part under the eye, and then we have a slight little bulge where the nose or the cheek begins. And again, you can look at your negative space to work out where everything sits. So I'm going to look at that and figure out that it comes across gently in like that. And then we've got this lovely bulbous sort of shape for the nose that just touches the bottom of your paper or your picture. Okay, and then we've got the dark nostril sort of area as well. So we've got some of the left side and all of the right side inside there, and that sits around about there. So see how just looking at those shapes you can start to draw in where those main lines are. We've also got a little bit of the background of the deer down through here, so you can see it's probably the shoulder or part of the chest or whatever behind everything here. So it's a little bit blurry because it's further away. So that's an important segment to notice as well. And just looking at the black and white version, you can see it's quite light in around the face here, which again helps to highlight the nose and bring it forward. And then we've got a little bit of dark fur just off here into fading off into the background, and it's sort of blurred away into the distance. Okay, so that will become important when we do colour afterwards. The other thing to notice is the detail or the lines in the face. So you can see there's a lovely little line that comes down around here and across the front of the nose. So we've got that lovely little arch that sort of defines the shape of the nose or the face through there. So you can lightly draw in those shapes. It's really good to do this before you do your colour version because you get familiar with all the shapes and you kind of figure out where things sit. And it just helps you with your final version so much if you have a little rehearsal. So I'm just darkening off where I can see darker patches of fur. You can see there's a line right down the middle of the nose. It's like a little ridge. So that's darker. And then on either side of it, it's a mid-tone, like a mid-grey colour or mid-brown. Up around the top here, the fur is a little darker there. And then down between the eye and the nose, we have some darker fur through there. Around the nostril area, the fur around that is quite light, but then we've got this lovely dark nostril. So fill that in nice and dark with your charcoal. Don't worry too much about all the details at this point. Just really want to focus on the lights and the darks and the tones to get familiar with what's happening there. Alrighty. So that's that little section. So we've got most of the nose in that bit. Then when you come over to this segment here, you can see we continue on the face. So the rest of the face is in this area. and it's taking up probably about a third of the right-hand side of this section here, this segment. So knowing that, we can start to draw in the side of the face and bring the shape down through here. It has a little dip in it, and then we come down and we continue the mouth area there, and then you can continue the nostril or the snout across through onto the other side there as well. I should have gone a bit wider, I think. So that's how we've kind of got the deer face drawn up now with using that grid method. And it just really helps, doesn't it, to break it down into pieces, into segments, and turn it into shapes rather than fur and hair and things like that. Sometimes it's just easier to look at things as a shape. And then when you do that and you really study what you're doing and focus on, you know, the grids and how big and wide and everything is, then the picture will come together all by itself, as long as you focus on those things. Okay. So there's a little nose. I just did a bit of a blur around here. The other thing these kneadable erasers are good for is blending. So you can actually just push it around gently and it'll sort of blend your charcoal or pastel softly too. So you can get these lovely soft blended finishes on your artwork. Might pop a bit of shine in that other eye. Didn't put it in before with your eraser or your pencil or whatever. Obviously we need to do, you know, we would spend, if you were doing this as a finished art piece, then you would spend a lot more time on your shading and things and working on that. But we're not today because this is just our little practice run. We want to get stuck into the colour. Carrying on though, before we go, across on this side here, you can see that the fur behind the nose on the deer is a little lighter again. So see, we've got this darker fur coming down through here. It's not that dark, but it's darker down through this area. And then the neck fur, or yeah, this area here is a bit lighter. So that's going to, again, bring the face forward and it kind of blurs off the background a bit. So there's a lighter tone down through there. And then as it comes across here, it gets darker again because that's fading off into the background. Okay. So we've got lots of tones, lots of bumps and lumps and different textures all the way through there. And the rest of the deer sort of on that left-hand bottom segment, it kind of just wanders off into the background there. So when we do this in colour, it'll make a lot more sense because we're not spending a bunch of time on all the detail at this point. But that was the main exercise, was just to get familiar with the drawing and the structure and the composition and the tones and figure out how we're going to draw this up and where everything's going to sit in relation to each other. Okay, so it's not a very good drawing at this point, but as I said, if you wanted to spend more time on that, you could actually refine this and make it quite beautiful because charcoal is a beautiful, beautiful medium to work in. So don't ever discount working with charcoal. It's a lovely medium. I just noticed around the edge of this ear, it's quite light. And so to lighten the edge of the ear here, I'm going to darken off the fur here. And these are all things that are really important to note as we move into the next section. And then we can get the eraser or a white pencil and just lighten off the edge of the ear. And again, that will bring it forward and separate it from the back and create more drama or contrast in your art. Okay, so let's move on and do our colour version next. And again, you're going to need to refer back to your picture to do the grid again. So we'll draw it up in pretty much the same way as we've just done with the charcoal, but we'll be using pastels. So what we want to do is figure out which pastels are the darkest and which are the lightest and what colours we're going to use. So converting colour into tone now is really important. Okay. All right. So we'll pop the charcoal aside for a moment. What I want to look at now is the colour selection for drawing this deer up in pastels. So I've picked out a few colours, and I'll just do a little swatch here on the side of my page so that you can have a look at that. I'm just looking at my deer face, really. It's a little bit too fat, but anyway, never mind. It's good to know these things now. Let's start with the darkest one. So what I've got here is a black, because I can see we've got some beautiful black eyelashes, and there's a little bit of black on the nose and possibly in the eyes as well. So black is going to be a nice one to get our nice dark tones in there. The next colour, or next colour I've got, I'm going to try and do this in order from dark to light. So I've got a dark brown. So this is kind of a reddy brown colour. That would be nice to mark in all the darker areas and then possibly go over it with lighter browns to get the fur. What's my next darkest? Probably this one, which is another brown, not quite as red. So I'm starting off with a reasonably large palette today, because there are so many different browns in this image. So I wanted to have a nice range of brown colours that I can kind of mix together and blend and try to get all those different tones going on. So I'd say that these four are probably my darkest pastels that I'm going to use. And then I'm going to come into my mid colours. So I've got this lovely orange or terracotta kind of colour, which is really nice for your orangey tones. There's a lot of orange in this. I might have to grab another orange if that's not bright enough as we go. And another lighter sort of a red brick colour. Again, just to create a range of tones within that mid-range. I picked up this brown as well, which is kind of a fawny sort of lovely brown. So that's quite nice too. They're all very similar in colour, but can you see as I'm working from top to bottom, they're getting slightly lighter. So this is where you really need to start focusing on tones and how much lighter things are. Now this one is an old Rembrandt that I haven't really used before, obviously, because it's still got paper on it. And that's a little bit more of an orangey brown as well. So that's quite a nice one. Rembrandts are great because they're a bit harder, these pastels, and so you can get lots of lovely fine lines with them. So see how I'm getting a nice sharp line there? That'll be good for fur and hair and things like that. So your harder pastels are really good for getting your finer lines in like that. Just need to make sure that you've got a nice little edge on the top of the pastel. Or pencils are really great too. Softer pastels don't give you quite as fine a line. You can see that one's a bit softer, and I'm not getting a very fine line because it's not as hard. Okay, my next colour is a grey. So we've got a couple of greys in here. This is a lovely warm grey. It's quite a beautiful grey. I can see quite a bit of that in the face. You know, those grey kind of black colours through there. Then I've got a lighter grey, I think. It's a little bit lighter, not much difference there. This one's a bit more green than that one. And then I've got this lovely pale sort of skin tone colour. And then my next one is, I think that's Australian grey. So it's not white, but it's a lovely light tone. Gosh, I've got a lot of colours, haven't I? And white. So white will be lovely for those little tufts of hair up here in the ears and round under the nose area. There's a little bit of white there, so we can use white for that. So that is my quite large colour range. Now, you might not have all those browns or, you know, as much in your palette, and that's okay. We can make it work. Potentially, you could sort of cut out probably 2 or 3 of these middle ones and still have a pretty good range of colours to play with. So just as long as you've got, you know, an orangey kind of colour, a couple of greys and a dark brown and a black and a cream and a white, I think will be good to go. So that's my little palette, and I'll leave that there so you can refer back to that as we go. I should probably peel some of the paper off this, and I might leave it actually just to remind myself that that's for the fur. And with regard to paper to do this on in colour, I've picked this colour. So it's soft umber, I think it's called. So I quite liked that because it's kind of neutral. It's not too dark, it's not too light, and it's sort of picking up some of those colours in the deer. I've put it onto a little board, so I always work on a hard board and I tape my paper down onto it. This tape I've used a few times, so it might not be quite sticky enough now. Probably need another bit or two on there to keep it still. But the tape is good because it means you don't have to keep moving your or holding it down with your other hand. It means you have a free hand, and the board is good too because it gives you a nice firm surface to work on. Today I'm working flat on my table, which means that I'll gather a bit of dust on my page. So next to me on my table, I've got a bit of paper towel or 2 sheets stretched out. So as I go, what I'll do is I'll tip my board up like this and I'll bang it on my paper towel, and that will collect some of the dust that doesn't want to stick to my page, and then I can get rid of it later. Try very hard not to blow on it. People like to blow their dust away, but if you're sitting at a computer like I am, you're going to end up with pastel dust all over the place, and it's terrible if you want to clean it up. So best to tip it off, or if you're working on an easel, then you can just let it drop down into your little tray. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is take a little break for 10 minutes while everybody gets their colours organised and paper sorted out. If you want to go ahead and start to draw up your grid and everything, you can do that using either a light pencil on a dark paper or a mid-tone paper. So this colour, this is a white, would be fine, or a dark pastel pencil. You know, something you can see. It doesn't have to be black, but something dark if you're on the light paper. Or charcoal is a great thing to use as well, because charcoal actually comes off this gritty paper really easily. It doesn't seem to hang on quite so nicely as pastel, which is good if you want to remove it. So charcoal is a good option if you want to draw up your grid with that and start drawing up your deer. And if not, if you want to go and have a coffee and then do it with me when I get back, that's what we can do. So I will pause now and lovely. So welcome back. Hope you've got a cup of tea or a coffee there with you and you've had a nice little break or been busy getting your drawing sorted out. So there are all the colours, and I'll pop aside my little sketchbook for now. And now we'll get busy focusing on drawing up our deer onto the page. So the first thing we want to do is put the grid lines on. If you haven't got that done already, then mark on your grid lines. What I like to do as I'm doing this is just leave a little mark on the outside of my paper. So if you're working on this kind of paper, which is your Colour Fix art spectrum paper, you'll have a white border around the edge. And I find it quite useful to keep a little mark there where my grid lines are so that I can find them again later. So sometimes when you're halfway through a drawing, you think, oh gosh, where was the nose again? Was it left or right of that grid line? Or, you know, whereabouts did that fit in? And if you have the little marks on the outside and you've covered them all up, your grid lines on the paper itself, then you can kind of hover your ruler over the top or lightly draw the line in again and get the drawing right, because often when you're filling in all the darks and the lights and things, we do sometimes lose the lines or the drawing, and it can be a bit tricky figuring out where things need to be. Okay, so that's my piece of paper, and I've drawn my grid lines up. I've got a halfway line across the middle, one down the center, and then I've broken up my quarter parts into, you know, another segment again, just to break this down into more pieces so that we can draw it up with reference to the grid. All right, so I don't have it printed in front of me, so I've got to keep jumping back over to my computer to have a look at the picture. All right, so where were we? So last time, remember, we had this dark section up the top in the top left grid, and we moved across into this bit. So let's draw in the lines first, and then we can start to block in some of the tones or the colours. So we'll just draw in the shapes around the deer face at the moment, and we won't worry too much about what's happening in the background just yet. So mark in a place where the ear comes in onto the page within that grid section there. So you can see it comes in just slightly right of the grid line. And then again, look at your negative space. So if I look at that grid line, I can see the bottom of the ear comes to just above halfway. So I'd say about there-ish. And then we have a little angle, and then the eye. So the eye takes up probably, oh, I'm looking at the top of the eye, like the eyelid area, probably takes up just under half of this size of the grid. So if that's my halfway line, and if you feel like you need to break your grid down into smaller segments, by all means do that. Whatever's going to make the drawing easier for you. So I'd say the eye lid comes down to about there. So I'm just looking at the lid of the eye, the bottom of the ear, and then the ear shape comes across like that, sort of. Probably not quite as wiggly as that, but something like that. And then we've got the eyelid that comes out here. And then we've got the shape of the eye. So if we draw the shape of the outline of the eye, that comes down quite close inside this grid section. I think I've gone over too wide, I have to. So this is when you do this sort of thing, because I was drawing, see this line down through here, I was drawing that down. That's the line inside the eye and in comparison to this grid. And then I realized I've gone too wide here because the top of the eye doesn't come that far over. It only comes into about there, I reckon. So I have to take this out. And this is, again, another good reason to use charcoal for your sketching and your drawing, because it's easy to get off. Okay, so that comes to about there, like that. So that to me is the eyelid. So we're going to have little eyelashes coming off there. I haven't done the eyeball yet. I'm coming down here and looking at the tear duct kind of shape of the eye and how it comes around there. So we're getting, see how we're getting a bit more precise now that we're seriously doing this in colour. I'm getting a little bit more precise with my drawing. And that's what I can see is happening. And then you just literally slot the eyeball in there. So it's got a lovely rounded shape that comes outside of the shape of the head there. And then back in through here. Okay. So that's around about the shape of the eyeball. So this is where you just want to be making sure that you get all your bits and pieces in the right place now. And as I said, charcoal's brilliant because you can take it off if you need to, and it doesn't stain your paper like a pastel will. Otherwise use pastel pencil, but just press lightly. Okay, so that's the eye bit. I'm not going to worry about colouring everything in just yet. We just want to get those outlines sorted out. So we've got that section in, we've got the eyelid in there, and that'll kind of come across like that, loosely down through there. Then we're going to come over into the next segment and look at the edge of the ear. So again, we've got that lovely negative space shape that's going to really help us get that the top of the head shape across through there. So you can just look at the space around the head rather than the shape of the top of the head there, and just get those lines in through there. Figure out where the top of the head intersects with your grid line and just draw those lines across through there. So that's the top of the head and the ear. Then we're going to move over into this segment too. So see how we're doing a little bit more information as far as line work goes now, but not so much as shading and things, because we'll get back to that in a minute. Okay, so we're just putting the line work in through here. So again, the negative space, we come down on a slight angle and then we go up, and the ear intersects with the edge of your page at about there. So I'm just going to draw a line across to there. And that's around about the shape of the outside of the ear. Cool. Then we're going to draw the other side of the ear. So that's the underneath section, and notice where that sort of comes in onto the page. It's got a little wiggle to it, and it kind of comes across to about there. So that's the ear shape on the right-hand side there. And again, you can look at the negative space around that. So you can find your shapes by looking at the background rather than the actual ear. Okay, and now we've got this little eye. So let's have a look at this. What we've got is the eyelid, which comes at an angle, and I'm just trying to place that in the right spot in relation to my grid line. And it comes down almost to the top of that grid line there. Not quite, we've got eyelashes in there, but it comes to about there and then it arcs around. So I'm not looking at the eyeball, I'm looking at that outline of the eye socket or area. And it comes across and down, and see how it crosses over now down into this next grid section. So we're on the right-hand bottom grid now, and the eye crosses over in the corner here. Okay, I'm looking at the tear duct area, the skin, not the eyeball. And then it comes into this next little grid area and then out again and around to about there. So if you can look at the skin of the outline of the eye area, we've got that kind of shape going on. Not the eyeball, we'll put that in a minute. Okay, so that's that little shape there. So it comes across this little corner here at the top of the grid and then into the next grid section and slightly across this line here and then back over that way. So that's around about where that eye sits. This is really important. You've got to get those eyes in the right place. Otherwise, she's going to look a bit wonky, cross-eyed or crazy or something. Now we've got that shape there, we can put the eyeball in because it's literally inside this segment or this eye socket area. So we've got to get the eye socket bit done first, and then we can put the eyeball in through there. So that's about there. So it's quite rounded on the outside. See how it bulges out around that skin area. And we've got those little eyelashes. We can put them in later. We can put a few in now if it makes you feel better. Cool. So that's that eyeball. So see how now we've got those two eyes in the right spot. So that's really important. Keep double checking that. Keep measuring with your own eyes. How far is this from there? You know, the distance from the grid lines and other things. And that's how you figure out where things need to sit. Okay, I'd have a sip of coffee. All right, so now I'm going to bring the line under the eye. See that line under there? We've got the little cheekbone or whatever that is coming down through there. So it intersects the grid about here. And then it keeps coming across. And then we've got a slight little bulge. And again, you can look at the negative space around the front of the nose here. I'm just going to press lightly in case I need to take it out or rub it away. And then we come down. We've got this beautiful round snout sort of area down all the way to the bottom of the page. So that literally comes off the bottom of your page here. So that's kind of the shape of the nose and the snout. Okay. And then, of course, we had this little bit of blurred deer back here in the background. So there's a bit of like brownish golden fur and then a lighter fur around there. So we can do that after with the colours. All right, so we've got the snout in there. Then we're going to, might continue this around actually. Let's carry on with this shape of the face and get the whole face drawn in first, and then we'll come back to the nose. So let's go back up to the top on the eye on the left here, on your left, and continue this line of the face down through this grid. So remember, in this grid segment here, the face only takes up probably sort of that much of it. The rest of it is all background. So if we know that, then we're not going to make it too wide, hopefully, like I did last time. Come down, slightly bulging out there with the little cheekbony shape, and then it comes down and we've got this lovely round little snout. So that's sort of what you want to have drawn in, that kind of shape. Okay, and now we've got that in there. We've got this, see there's a little neckline, that's what that light fur is back there. It's a bit of a line of the neck, so you can see the contrast between the neck and the rest of the body. And we'll do that in a minute. So now we've got to draw in the nostril bits. Okay, so they're basically sitting here right at the front, and Make sure you leave a bit of skin around the sides there. But the bottom of it literally comes down to the bottom of your page. Okay, and that comes around through there. Okay. And that's that. So then we've got a couple of nostrils here. You can't really see a lot of detail. A lot of that will be done in tones, just so it won't be definite lines, but it'll be all done with darks and lights, and that will help us to find all the bits and bobs that we need to have. And then, of course, we've got these two little sort of triangle shapes just here on the left and the right at the top of the snout. They're just little dark areas, probably bone, that give us the shape of the nose and so forth. Okay, cool. Let's just lightly draw in. Can you see down the middle of the face? It's like sort of got this definite shape of the nose, hasn't it? Because it's coming forward and it's closer to us as we look at it. So when you're looking at your tones and your shapes and your sharpness of your lines, you want to notice how blurred or how sharp something is, and that will determine the distance for you. So, for example, the back of the deer here on the left-hand side, most of the left-hand side of this image is kind of all blurred because that's the back of the deer. It's the body of the deer. We don't need to see all that detail, but because the face is closest to us, we can see, you know, all the little hairs and the shine in the eyes and the shimmer on the nose and so forth. So if something's closer to us, we're going to have a finer, harder line, usually, sharper line. And then when it's further away, it's more blurred. It's off in the background and it's blurred, a bit like our normal vision, you know, when things are further away, they're blurred. And if they're closer, they're sharper. So that's our drawing. And that's probably all we need to do with the charcoal or the pencil at this point. So next thing we can do is pick up some of the pastels and start to block in some of the tones. That'll be the fun bit. The other option you have today is whether you fill in the background or not. So that's up to you. You can, I didn't actually pick up any colours to do the background with, so I might do it later. And it wouldn't be too difficult to do later. Usually I like to work from back to front. If I'm going to do a background, I like to put that in first because it's easier then to build things in front and not have to get back in behind things to put backgrounds in. But in this instance, we've really only got this bit here on the right side and above the head that you could potentially call background and fill that in later on. I quite like the mottled grey sort of effect that's happening in there, and it looks like there's light shining through in some places, so that will help to bring the deer face forward, if you know, with those different tones behind it, with the darks and the lights. If you look around this ear here, behind that ear, it's darker, and then as you come down around the face, we've got this beautiful bit of light, and that helps to make the face look darker because we've got light behind it. And you know, all those little things make a difference. They really do. So what we'll do first, though, is the deer, and we'll see how we go for time. And if we've got time, then we'll jump in and do the background. And then we can put all the fine hairs and eyelashes and things on at the end. All right, so let's block in some of this deer. Make sure you've got your colours nearby. Pop the charcoal aside for a minute. And I like to keep my colours for each picture in a little box like this, because then I can remember what I used. If I don't finish it today, I can still come back next week and I've got my palette sitting there and it's separate from my big collection, so I don't get confused and forget what I had, which I tend to do a lot if I don't keep them separate. Sometimes I want to put it all away and then I want to get it all out again and think, oh, which blue did I have there? What did I use? I can't remember. All right, let's go. So the darkest tones, let's pick up our darkest colours. Now, I'm not talking about black. We're going to save black for eyelashes and things like that, but the darkest areas in this particular picture, I would say, is the nose. So this is my darkest brown. I might add black to it later just to darken it off a bit more, but I'm going to darken that off in there. So what you want with your pastels are short stumpy bits that you can actually lie down flat like this onto your paper and then kind of push it around, so you get a much wider mark, but it's a softer mark, and you just get more down on the page faster. without making hard lines, because sometimes hard lines are harder to remove and they kind of get in the way a little bit. So we're just going to stay blurry for now. So as we work towards the end of the painting, then we'll start doing more detail. But for the beginning, we're going to be blurry and blocking in. So we're looking for darker areas, the darkest areas. That's the eyeballs. And if you feel this is not the right colour, it doesn't matter. You can come back with another colour over it later. What we're just trying to do is find the dark tones. So we've got those little dark areas on the ears there. We've got little triangular kind of shapes on the ears. Just put some dark down through there. You might have picked up a blue violet or something for your darks. I didn't grab one today, which is unusual for me. Because normally I like to use blue violets for my darks. And then up in this top left corner, it's quite dark. In the black and white version, you can see it looks much darker than it does in the colour. Okay, so I've got a bit of dark going on, that's good. And I can see just in the top of the head here, I know it's under the other fur, but there's actually dark under there. So we're looking for the under colours at the moment, not the top stuff, because we can put that over after. See how it's kind of dark down through there. So I just want to get a little bit of that in there as well. And then we've got a few little dark spots through the ears where we've got some shadow inside the ears there. So we're just going to darken those off as well, just to start to create a bit of the form. So all of these things contribute to creating the form and the shape and the feeling and the texture of what's going on. Okay, so that's my dark colour. And I'm going to, I've got other darks there that I can kind of add to as well if I feel like it. And of course my black, I'm going to have to go and get blue violet, I think. But anyway, for now, we're going to move on to the mid colours. So remember I said there's a lot of lovely orange and reddy sort of colours up here in the back area. So let's do some of that now with this orangey kind of terracotta colour. If you've got your picture up on a screen, it might be easier to see the brights of the orange. Doesn't matter what, you know, don't worry too much about getting into the detail or anything at this point. All we're trying to do is get some pastel on the paper. And that way, once you've got pastel down, then you can sort of start to push it around a little bit. So I've just picked up my reddy, my light mid-tone reddy brown colour, because I can see up, just be up behind the head here, and this eye, it's kind of a bit more red through there. And it's more orange to the left of your picture in the fur there. So I'm kind of pushing them together now. So you can put one colour over the top of another and sort of push them together gently, gently. Okay, you can see I've got a fair bit of dust now sitting on the paper. And just up here behind this ear, there's a little bit of body as well. So I'm just going to put a bit of a suggestion there of the back of the deer as well with this red-brown colour. So this is a really nice mid-tone kind of colour. While I've got it in my hand, I'm going to look at the picture and kind of see where else is there some of that kind of lighter red. I think inside the ears there's a fair bit of it. So I'm just going to dab some of that around. So be quite loose with this. Don't worry about being precise yet. That part will come. We're just getting some pastel on the paper for now. The face is not so red. There's a tiny bit in there. I might put a little bit down just so that it's underneath when we put other colours over the top. And around the eye, see this section around the eye? It's a little kind of pinky colour around through there. So I'll just use this reddy brown colour in there. Now I know my eyes are going to have to get darker, but this is a good start. So the background area we'll just leave undone for now. And depending on what colour paper you've used or whether you like it or not, will depend on whether you pop your background in later on. So that's the reddy brown colour. The next colour I want to put in is a bit of grey. Okay, so let me see. I want to put some grey in. Now this is a warm grey. This is my warm, kind of a brown grey. There's a warm grey and a cool grey. And so the warm greys have a more of a brownish kind of tinge to them. And I think this is quite a lovely grey, and I can see quite a bit of grey in the head area. So I'm getting that, running it around over the top of that reddy colour that I put in earlier. Okay, and so these will blend beautifully together. So don't be afraid to mix your colours around a little bit. Okay, but it's quite grey down there, isn't it, through the front of the head. And then across the top of the nose here, and there's a little bit down on the side of the nose as well, and on the little cheeks. So what I love about pastels is that you can just kind of bang colour down like this, and then we can refine it as we go. So you start really loose, and bold, I guess is a good way to describe it. And then as you work towards filling the paper up with colour and blending things in, that's when you start to get more into the detail. But it's a lovely medium for being really loose. And a lot of people prefer this style of what they call drawing, because it just means you can be lovely and loose and don't have to be too precise. So as you continue working with your pastels, you'll find your own style or method or whatever it is that you prefer to do, and you'll refine that, because pastels are terribly, not terribly, that's a terrible word. Pastels are very, what's the word? Pliable. You can do pretty much anything with them. So you can leave it loose like this. I don't particularly like that look, but some people do. Or you can blend it all in and start to get it a little bit more refined and a little bit more realistic. All right, so I've got my greys on there. Now I've picked up this orange again. So this is the orange I used over there in the background. And I can see some of that here in the face. Can you see that in the face here? We've got quite a lot of this lovely terracotta sort of orangey colour in the fur around through here. Now, if you fill in the light areas where you want to put white or a light colour, don't stress. We'll find it again and we can pop it back in. But see, as I'm mixing my orange over my grey, starting to get these really beautiful, I don't know, muddy tones, I suppose you call them. And they're quite lovely, aren't they? So these beautiful mud tones are glorious for things like animals and scenery and anything that needs to be sort of earthy. I think you can make some really beautiful combinations of colours. So we are going to blend today, because that's my favourite thing to do, and I love blending in the colours and just to see what happens and what I can make. So once we've got enough on there, then we'll have something to blend. At the moment, we need to add a little bit more pastel to the paper. So the trick is for blending is to make sure you've got enough pastel down on there to push around, because if you don't, then it just makes it too hard, because you end up trying to push it around and leaving big gaps in the paper. So see, I'm just showing you here. If I push it around, and I'm pushing pretty hard, so when you push hard, what happens is the colours blend together on the paper and you get all these lovely dirty muddy sort of effects. Now that's kind of cool, because you can see already, because I put the dark under that, now you can see the form of the face starting to come together, can't you? Because we've got this lovely darkish tone underneath and then the lighter colour here on the side. And so that's now starting to give me that feeling of form or shape that I'm looking for. So that's why we put the darks down and then the mids, and then we'll put lights in a minute. But when we start to blend it all, then it starts to kind of come alive. And depending, of course, on which direction you blend it. So I've got enough pastel on here now that I can actually start to push the colour in and fill up my paper. So this is like getting a foundation layer down, or your basic layer, and then we can build on top of that. So you can see as I'm pulling it around, it's dragging all those lovely colours in together. It's got those greys and the reddy browns and the orange, and it's just making this really nice combination of colours. Okay, but make sure when you do pull it around like this that you push it in the direction that it's growing. So look at the direction of the fur on the face here. So everything that's running up from the nose is sort of running up and down, isn't it? We've got this lovely vertical kind of feeling of the direction of the hair. And as it comes up from the center, you can see it's all sort of sprouting out a little bit to the left and the right as it heads onto the head. So if you pull your finger in that direction, right, what's going to happen is it pulls the pastel around in the same direction and starts to create the feeling of the hair growing in that direction, or the feeling of the shape of the thing. So I hope that makes some sort of sense. So yeah, always try to pull the pastel around in the direction of the thing that you're drawing. If it's a smooth vase or something, then you want to follow the shape of the vase and make sure you have beautiful smooth lines. In this instance, look at the direction the hair is growing in and pull it around in that direction. So having said that, see on this side of the face, on the left side, our left, well, either side really, but the hair is actually growing downwards. It's not growing up towards the head. It's sort of growing out from the nose down towards the edge of the face. So if you now pull your finger in that direction, and I'm just doing these little up and down movements with my finger to blend that pastel in nicely through there. See how it's just blending in nicely. But pulling it in the direction that it's growing will help, will definitely help to give it the feeling of that. I didn't do it on this side, so I'll just change direction over here and pull that down, because what it does is it pulls the pigment or the little specks of colour around and hopefully starts to form the shapes that we're looking for. I'm just going to softly push in the area around the eyes. I can come back in there and do more detail later. So we're just getting the foundation colours down first. Now, if you go outside the lines like I've done just there, I've been a bit too wide here, your kneadable eraser should remove it as long as you haven't pressed too hard. So I can dab it rather than rubbing like you normally would with an eraser. If you just find a little edge, so you can reshape these, and you need to do that because every time you touch it onto the pastel, what it does is it picks up the pigment, so it actually puts the pigment onto the eraser like a bit of sticky stuff. So you need to knead it again, reshape it again, find a reasonably clean side, and then you can do another couple of dabs, and then you've got to reshape it again. This is why they get really dirty, because they get full of pigment and pastel dust. But it's a great way to remove, or even blend if you want to, some of the pastel off the paper if you feel like it's, you want to remove it, rather than rubbing it, because other erasers will actually take like a layer of the paper away rather than picking up the pigment. So that's why the kneadable erasers are really good, because they'll just take the pigment and they won't damage the paper. They leave it nice and intact. Okay, so now we've got this shape kind of going on in the head there. That's looking quite good, isn't it? And what I want to do now is start to just kind of blend everything else in, and then we can come back and do a bit more finer work on some of the details. So let's start at the back here, because this is kind of the background of the deer. I don't know if I've got enough pigment on there. I might not yet, but I'm just going to start to rub that in. I'm using 2 fingers because it's a pretty big area. And I can put 2 fingers on the paper and just pull it again in the direction that I can see the hairs kind of going at the back of the deer there. So you can kind of look at how that's working. Come all the way in close to the face, join those areas if you like. So this is where we want to have a nice continuous line of fur or background behind the hardness of the face. So you might have to overlap that a little bit. And this is where sometimes you can lose your lines or your drawing, because you have to overlap those edges and make sure you have a nice continuous flow. So that's where our little grid lines around the edges come in handy if you're trying to find where things need to sit again. We should be fine though, because I think we've got pretty basic shapes in here, and we've got our eyes and the nose and everything where it needs to be. So that should be okay. So see how I've just pushed all that through. It's probably not quite enough pastel on the paper. I can still see some of the paper underneath. Now, that's fine too. If you want to leave it like that, that's absolutely fine. It's one of the good things about working on coloured paper, is that you can actually leave it showing through sometimes, and it becomes part of the art. So to me, that's a bit too mid-tone. I'm going to have to add a bit more light and maybe a bit more dark to create some more texture through there, but that's a good base. You notice when I am blending in that I tend not to lift my finger off the paper too often. So when I'm doing this kind of thing, I'm literally leaving my paper on the, fingers on the paper, because that gives me a lovely continuous kind of line. If you're doing this kind of thing, so up and down, lift off, and that's okay sometimes depending on what you're doing, but sometimes that kind of gives you funny little marks and it doesn't give you a nice continuous flow. So again, depending on what you're painting will depend on what kind of movements you do. Okay, so let's go through here. What I want to do is pop a bit of light in here and there. No, hang on, we'll finish blending. Let's get all those pushed in. So this little neck area here is reasonably light, but I want to just push it through into there a little bit like that. Okay, and then the other neck side too, so we'll push that in as well. So that sort of feels to me like it's coming from the middle outwards, but did tend to sort of push up and down there through there, but you can change direction and sort of push your colours around a little bit like that. Okay. Lovely. Now let's pop up into the ears. There's a little bit of the ears that I haven't, I'm just going to blur off this back of the deer up here. That's nice soft sort of colour. So in the ears, I haven't put some colour where I want to put white. And often if you want to have a really white section, try not to put any colour down underneath where you want to put your white, because then it's a bit harder to get it really white. So where you want the whitest whites, make sure you try to leave some of the paper unpainted or unfilled, because it'll be a lot easier to fill in, put your whites down on clean paper rather than something that's already got colour underneath it. Having said that, I'll probably end up filling up most of this anyway, but that's okay. That's where the white pencils come in nice and handy. You can actually get them to really, do some really nice sharp lines and highlights. Okay, so you can see some of this area has been kind of left unfilled, and that's okay because I can get some of that lovely white or light colour in there. And then I'm just going to push around inside this nose bit here. So see how by blending it all, it's kind of gone all blurry. And that's okay, that's good, that's what we want. We want this lovely soft blurred sort of feeling or image, because now that means we've got lots of lovely colour on the paper and it's kind of filled it all up, and we can now work on getting the detail in there and refining things, getting some light and dark in there so that we can bring the face forward and send the body back and all that sort of stuff, and get the details. So working with pastels, I find this is, the best process for me, because I can kind of get all my colour down first, and it gives me a bit of a map. Then you can sort of see where you're going to go next and what you want to do. So this part's maybe one of the hardest things to do, is to get all those tones in the right place. And looking at this now, I can see I'm going to have to go something darker for the eyes and again for the nose. So we're going to have to go for black or blue violet or something like that. That's okay. No problemo at all. Depending on your preference too, if you like the reddy browns, then by all means stick with those. So that's our basic shape there. Next thing we want to do is start to work on getting some of the lights and darks a little bit more emphasized. So let's get into the background. So that's this left-hand side. We're going to work in there first. As I said before, it's a very blurry sort of area, so there's not a real lot of detail, but there is definitely a bit of tone. So we need to get a bit more of a range of tone happening in there. So looking at my image, I can see there's a bit of grey. I don't know if this, no, that grey is probably too light. but around this eye area, remember I said before, when you want a dark thing to stand out, put light around it, and vice versa. If you want something light to stand out, you put dark around it. And that's what makes the lights and the darks pop. I'm just using my light grey to see if this will be light enough, just to get that feeling of the body back there. See, so by highlighting this section here, it kind of shows the back of the deer and where the back begins and the shoulders end or something. I'm not terribly sure about the anatomy of things, but if we just put colour or light and dark where we see it, then hopefully that'll sort of make it all flow together nicely. Now I have got this darker grey, this warm grey I used before on the face. So if I put that in here, see around the ear, the edge of the ear is very light. Now we haven't put that in yet, but when we do, we want to have the darker background behind it so that it kind of just makes the light pop or stand out. Okay, so I've just put a bit of the dark grey on there. I haven't covered the whole area with it because I still want some of that lovely brown and orange to stand through or come through underneath. Okay, so again, that's just a little difference in tone to get the range coming through. And then down through the side here, so there's a bit of grey coming down through there. And you can kind of see the shape of the hair down through there. So it's sort of coming from the neck area outwards. So again, pulling it around in that direction will help to get the feeling of the background area, hopefully. Hopefully. Now this bit in the back there might not be quite light enough. So what's this grey look like? Well, that's the one I used before. A bit too green, isn't it? I think I might have to, it's quite nice for my lights though, to use that for other spots. Anyway, I think I want this a little bit lighter just so I can make that eye nice and dark later on and get it to pop. So I'm going to pop this bit of this creamy colour through here. So we haven't used any lights yet. So this is when we're starting to look at those lights, those little hints of light and dark shining through. We're just looking at the back area of the deer at the moment. We'll put more light in other spots after. Okay, so you can see as I'm building up my tones here, I'm pressing less hard and I'm sort of letting the pastel sit on the top. So this is what we do. We build up that lovely background. We get it lovely and thick and lush. And then as you come forward or as you do more detail, you kind of start to leave the pastel on the surface rather than blending it in too much. And that's when you start to get that lovely painterly kind of effect. And it gives it such lovely body and texture and shape and form. So now I'm just running around this area, picking up different tones, trying to get a bit of dark here, a bit of light there. Again, pulling it in the direction of the hair. Okay, so you just want to pull it in and out like that to try and create the feeling of the curves and the folds and all the bits and bobs in there. At the same time, you don't want to spend too much time, or actually you don't want to put too much information or detail in here because then that will make this the focus. So we're working on this area, the back of the deer first, to kind of make sure that that's all soft and blurred, and then as we come forward we'll do more detail. So basically when someone first looks at your painting, what you want them to see pretty much are the eyes and the face, and then their eyes will wander around and they'll find everything else. So everything else that we're doing here is kind of secondary to the focal point, if that makes sense. Okay, so we've got a few different tones and shapes. So you just want to look at the colours that are in there and figure out, you know, what can I put there that is about that tone or that colour? Can I do something lighter or darker? And just have a bit of a play with your tones. You could pop a bit more dark back in. So just because we've used dark already doesn't mean you can't bring it back in over the other colours now, just to start to create some of that lovely texture. Remember, up in the top left corner, we've got lovely dark areas up there. So I'm just having a bit of a play, pushing some colour around. And the fun part is when you blend them together or push them around on the paper, you just create all these really nice new kinds of colours and tones and things. It's lovely. Okay, and I'm just going to go back in around this light area behind the eye and lighten that up a little bit more, because I just want to make sure I get that light enough so that the eye really pops when we put that dark eyeball in there afterwards. Okay, pushing, pushing, there we go. So that might be enough in the background for now. You can always come back in later and, you know, touch it up, do a bit more detail if you want to. But as I said, we want that to sort of sit there and be secondary to the other information that we're doing. Now, as we work forward, see the neck here? I did that quite dark before, but I'm looking at it now thinking it's actually really quite light. There's a light grey kind of colour down here through the neck, so I'm going to just lighten that off a little bit with this lighter grey. And because I put dark underneath it, it's still giving it a nice feeling of depth and form, so that's fine. The other thing to notice is this area here. I want this area of the neck to be lighter because the nose or the cheek as it comes forward is slightly darker in tone. So again, you can look at your black and white picture just to find those tones and figure out, ooh, is this lighter or darker? Look at that, because that'll tell you which bits are light and which bits are dark, and then you can kind of determine it from there. It's often hard to tell with colours. The other way you can do it is to squint. So if you squint at your reference photo, your coloured one, look through your eyelashes, you can see where the lightest parts are. And doing that now, I've realised, and then looking back at my painting, I need to go even lighter on that neck area. It's not light enough. So keep checking that all the time. It's really important. It took me years to figure that out. The sooner you learn that, the better your art will be. Now, I'm just running over this with my lighter creamy colour. And if I don't push that in, it's starting to look a bit furry, which is kind of cool. So I'm just doing these little light movements around it. And if I just leave it sitting on the surface like that, it starts to look fluffy, which is what we want. We want a little bit of texture now that we're getting more forward in the picture. So in that back area of the deer, we sort of wanted to leave it fairly blurred and soft, but as we move forward, we can now start to sort of try and get a bit more information in there and a little bit more detail. And so doing that nice little soft movement over the top, what's happening is the pastel's gripping onto the texture of the paper, but it's showing through the darker colours underneath that we put down there before. And so it's sort of starting to look a bit thick and furry, which is nice. That's what we want. That's what you want. Now I'm just glancing back at this top section up here, again squinting. So under my ear there, it's much darker. I'm going to have to go and get a blue violet. I just can't live without it. I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so, I don't know what that is. I think that might be a black or something. Let's see. Something dark. It's quite nice, whatever it is. Looks like a dark brown. And also, I think that's a blue violet. It's very purple. So blue violet I love because it gives me my darks. And it's just purple tinges or tones really create such nice shadows. So what I'm going to do is pop that around behind where the ear is up here. So again, squinting at my image, I want the ear to really pop forward when I put the lights on the edge of that. And so by putting the blue violet in the back there, that's going to help the light of the ear come forward. Yeah, yeah, that's better, isn't it? Better. It's a different dark to the dark brown, and I quite like what that does. And then I need to make sure I leave this area, which I've just blurred too much, around the eyeball lighter, because we want the dark of the eye to pop forward on the lighter background. Okay, so you got to kind of, it's complicated sometimes because you think, oh, light on dark, dark on light. That needs to be lighter, that needs to be darker, blah, blah, blah. And then again, I'm squinting and I'm thinking, oh, top left up here is darker. So I'm going to put a bit more of my blue violet in there. And then down through the shoulder area back here, there's a slight line of darker fur just through here. Just a slight, very slight, soft sort of line coming down through there. Okay, so that's nicer. So it's just given me a little bit more range of darks and lights through that back fur there, and nice, nice, nice. And again, as I said, if you wanted to put more detail in there, you could, but I want to move on to the face. You can get back in there afterwards if you want to do any more work on that. Just noticing again, oops, yep, okay. Up top here, behind the ear, see how that ear, this bit of the ear is dark? So I want to make that bit of the deer's body that fades off up into there slightly lighter, so that the dark of the ear stands out against the lighter body. Cool. Nice. Might have gone a little bit wide there. The other cool thing you can get with pastels is you can buy the colours of the paper. Now, I don't know if this is actually this raw umber colour. It looks a little bit more green to me, but if you have, so you can buy pastels this colour of your paper. So they're called colour fix pastels rather than colour soft, and they'll match the paper. So if you want to patch things up a little bit and still use the paper colour, you can do that with the pastels. It's kind of cool. So that's always a nice option. Always a good option. Carry on. Okay, so yeah, lighten that up a little bit behind there because we want to darken off that ear, which we can do right now actually with the blue violet. So let's go over some of those dark areas again with blue violet. I don't want to use black just yet because that's going to create some drama, and I want to save that for the darkest darks. And this is where you can kind of test now whether something's dark or light enough behind or around your subject. So we'll do some darks with the, I've got blue violet. You might have already used it. You're probably one step ahead of me. Perhaps a little bit smarter, I don't know. But I'm going to pop in my blue violet in these dark areas just so that I can make it a little bit darker. And as I said, leaving black for last. Same as leaving white for last. I like to leave my whites for last so I can use those for my final highlights. Okay, so there we go. That's better, isn't it? Just get a bit more of that dark in there, a bit more contrast. Put a bit of it in here too. Up through there. So I'm getting a bit carried away with myself, but I do like to kind of, now we've got some layers on there, I can kind of go, okay, so there's more dark down through the front of the nose there. There's a little ridge down through there. So just using my blue violet to emphasize that a little bit more. Cool. Now you can see I've got a lot of dust on the paper. And as I said before, I've got a bit of a paper towel next to me. So I'm just going to tip that off because it kind of gets in the way when it won't blend in. All right. And it sits on the surface. Okay, so let's have a look at our backgrounds now and see what else we need to lighten or darken. just looking down on the right-hand side of the nose. So behind that area there is lighter. It's got this nice little light patch down there, and that's going to help our nose kind of come forward as well. So got to notice these little things, and then I can just softly push that in. I'm not pushing very hard, so you can alter how well things blend by how hard you push. So if you just push lightly, it'll just softly blend things and let the colour sit on the surface. But if you want to push the colours all the way in, just press a bit harder, and that'll work nicely. All right, okay, now we're going to start to work on some of the details. So let's begin in the, we'll go up into the ear, I think. Let's do that top left ear first. See what we can do up in there. So we've already got our darks in there and a bit of the pinky sort of colours. So we need to get some of the lights happening now. I'm going to pick up my lighter grey. So because I want the white of the hair to pop a bit more, I don't want to put white down just yet, because then I won't be able to get the white hair to be whiter, if that makes sense. So what I'm going to do is start with this lighter grey colour, and I know then that I can actually go over that with a lighter colour and start to build up some of my lighter tones. So just have a look around the ear area. I'm just gone down now into above the eye there, because there's a little bit of a lighter kind of eyelid section through there. And then around the edge of the ear, just if you use the tip of your pastel, you could get a fairly sharp edge, hopefully, to define the edge of the ear there. Yeah? So we've got that going on. I'm going to put some of this down in the middle of the ear. This is very similar to my paper colour. It's kind of a greeny grey colour. It's not light enough, but it's a good base to build my lights on top of. Cool. And then I'm just checking my picture, sort of soften off some of those areas a little bit. So see how now we're starting to get a really nice range of tones going on in there. It's quite lovely. And then I can pick up my next lightest one. So that's that lovely creamy colour. I haven't used a lot of it yet, been sort of saving it. So what have I got for lights? I've got this creamy colour, and then I've got my Australian grey, which is another cream, and then I've got white. So see how they range slightly in tone there. It's probably a bit hard to see because they're dirty. Let me clean them off a bit. They get dirty when they run around with other pastels. So there's a white, and then there's a off-white, I'm going to call it. I think it's called Australian grey. And then there's like a, don't know what that colour is, skin tone kind of colour there. So I've got a very subtle range of lights in there. And then, of course, I've got my pale grey or greeny colour in there as well. So that's the light that I've used so far. So what I want to do is go from there to there to there to there and save this one for last. Okay, so I'm put my white aside. We don't want to use that right. We're going to save that till the end. So I've put some of this down. So now I'm going to pick up this one, and I'm just going to create a little bit of form and tone through here with this one over the grey green colour. And you can see as they mix together, they kind of make this really nice, I don't know what that is. It's a lovely colour though. It's kind of earthy, natural kind of colour. So see how I'm building up my levels of tone. And then again, I'm just going to run over the edge of that ear again with my lighter colour, just to highlight that a little more. Okay, so this is how we now start to build up those beautiful combinations of tones. And remember, we've got to do the same thing over in here. So repeat over in this ear what we've done in the first one. Now I'm going to pick up my lightest one. This is not white, but it's my next lightest. So I'm putting that where I want to highlight a couple of spots. So there's a little bit of lighter skin or fur just there at the base of the ear. See how that now starts to pop against those beautiful darks? And then around the edge of the ear, rather than doing a hard, solid line, I just want to do little soft wiggly bits to get the furry kind of feeling around the edges. So it's not a hard, sharp line. It's a soft, fluffy sort of line. So You might have to fiddle around a little bit with the edges, or even use a pencil if you have a pencil in a light tone to get those soft, fluffy edges in there. And then see inside up here, just want to lighten off in there a little bit, knowing that I'm going to put white in there and get some of those furry soft hairs over the top of this creamy colour afterwards. So saving my white for last. I'm going to do a little bit of fluff through here. See, we've got those little white fluffy hairs wandering around in there. See how that's now starting to come together? So we're going to do this sort of thing all over the face of the deer, and that it'll come alive, I promise. Okay, so we're just doing these lovely little soft, fluffy fur hair things with my creamy colour, and later on I can add white over that, and that will just make it all pop. So we've got that lovely dark interior colour in the ear, and then we've got this range of lights coming over the top to sort of build up all the different tones, and making it look like, you know, we've got this bit of the ear that's folded over. So I need to change my angle there a little bit, like that. Always checking your drawing, making sure your lines are in the right place and your edges and things. So that's brought the ear to life, hasn't it? So we're going to move over now into the other ear. We've got our darks in there already. So let's go back to the grey colour, that greeny grey, or whatever you used for your darkest light. I'm going to call it my darkest light. So we've put our darks down and we've put our mid-tones down, and now we're coming in with the lights to put the highlights in and just start to create some lovely tones. Okay, so I just lightly wiped that around over there. I know that's not the actual colour, but I quite like the tone, and often it's more important to care about the tone than the colour. Okay, so I've got my darkest light, and then I'm going to go for the next darkest one. So this is that lovely rich creamy kind of colour, and then I'm going to put a bit of that in where I can see a bit more light, and on the edge of this ear. So this ear is light on the bottom here, so I want to lighten up the edge of that and then have a bit of light coming up through there like that. And we can soften that off. You can blur that off a little bit. Just dab it with your fingers if it's too much, if it's too bright. And just keep kind of running this around, noticing the ear and the shape. So it's got that little fold that's dark at the top, and then it comes down fluffy, wispy through here. See? So we're getting some really nice tone happening through there. And then I've got my cream. So this is my lightest, not my white, but my next lightest. So I'm going to start to do some little hairy marks with that, just using the end of the pastel so you get those sharp edges to do some of those fluffy little hairy marks. Haven't used white yet, so white, saving white for last, just to get those final fine little hairs in there. But this is good. It looks white, so if you didn't ever use white, you'd never know. You'd just assume this was your whitest or your lightest. Okay, so that's maybe enough information in there for now. Just get those little edges. So when you're doing hairs like this with the edge of your pastel, what I do is I just lightly run it around. You don't want to do too much because you'll just mess it all up. But leave some of the background there, run over the top of it, and I kind of roll my pastel as the edge of it hits the page. So you're starting to get kind of uneven widths and things that look more natural. So if you want hard, sharp lines, then you just press harder and you keep your pastel on your page. Whereas when you want softer, hairy sort of marks, you just kind of pull it around gently and roll it a little bit to try and get a variation in the width of your line. Okay. So while I've got this light one in my hand, I'm just going to go back over to this eye, because we're moving out of the ears now and looking at the areas around the eyes. So the eyelid area here is quite light. If you squint, you can see that that's quite light. And that's, again, going to make the eyeball pop a bit more. So I'm just putting some light in around there. That's a real deer feature, isn't it? The light around the eyes like that. And then just underneath here, it's a little bit lighter as well. So I'm just using my creamy colour to do that. If it's too bright, then I can just dab that in softly with my finger and blur it off a little bit. See how that just sort of blurs it all off, and it takes that sharpness out and softens it off again. So you can put colour down and then touch it gently and soften it off. It's going to go back to my other light, which is the not as light one. Put some of that in there. And again, coming down through the snout there's a little bit of light coming across here. And as I do that, I'm going to start to sort of leave that on the surface rather than blending it in. So if we leave it on the surface, we just start to get that lovely furry effect, hopefully. Depending on your pastels, of course, too. So if your pastels are a bit harder, they might not be gripping so well. And you might need to work a bit harder to get that effect happening. So what I'm doing now is I'm kind of running around the face of the deer, looking for all the lighter areas, okay? So under the eye here, it's lighter. You can see the fur is kind of lighter around here, and then as it goes down towards the nose, it gets a bit darker. So you want to put a little bit there and then sort of fade it off as you come down towards the nose. And the edge of the face around here has a little bit of lighter fluff because we've got dark behind it. So that's going to bring that forward and make it pop a little bit better. So just be kind of gentle with your pastels. So when you want a hard mark with your pastels, you press nice and hard and it kind of sticks to the paper really well. And you might have to push it in a few times or, you know, do a few hard marks. But when you want soft marks, just go gently over the top. It's just wonderful how you can really vary the different effects that you get and the range of tone and colour just by varying how hard you push or how light you push to get those effects. So just, it's all in practice. It's all about finding, you know, the pressure and the movement and the way you hold it, the shapes and the directions you pull it around in that really give you the edge, I guess, of figuring out how to make pastels work for you. So as I'm running around this with my lighter colour, I'm thinking, oh, I need to get a bit more orange in there and a bit more of my mid-tone going on. But I'm just going to pop some of the lights in first, and then we can come back and add some mid-tones in over the tops where we might want to darken it again. But I'm running around down now around the nose area, so I can see it's quite light. See around the mouth and the nose. So as you come down to the bottom of your page, under the nose there, we've got this lovely light area, and we can actually make that whiter with white later. I just wanted to highlight that a little bit with my creamy colour because I can, and it's not too light. So this is kind of my lightest, or my darkest light, I should say. And again, depending on how hard you press. So if you just press lightly and then dab it in gently, you just get a very soft kind of a mark there. See how she's coming alive with all these beautiful highlights and darks? I can't wait to do the eyes. That'll be the fun bit. Okay, let's run back up to the right-hand side now. So you can see we've got a little bit of lighter fur again under the eye like we have on the other side. And it sort of tapers off as it gets darker down towards the nose with those mid-tones that we've already put in. And then around the eye, the top of the eye, so the eyelid has a lighter fur, and I'm just lightly rubbing this pastel over the top so that it's starting to hopefully look a little furry. So I want to start to get that furry feeling. And by running this around just lightly over the top like that, I can still see the colour underneath. So hopefully that's helping to do that. And then where you want it to be like a thicker colour or tone, just press a bit harder. But we're trying to keep our fingers out of it now. We've done the blending bit. So now's the time to sort of not blend so much, but just use the pastels themselves to get that lovely texture or feeling of tones going on. Okay, lovely, lovely. We've got a little bit of fur just down on the right-hand side of the face there. It's very sort of fuzzy and light as it comes down through here. And remembering that that neck area at the back there is still lighter than the nose. So we need to make sure we keep that nose area fairly dark in through here so that it comes forward and sits in front of this dark area back here, which probably should be blurred off a bit. I'll just blur that off a little bit with the pastel that matches my paper, which is probably pure chance more than anything. Sort of matches, not quite. Alrighty, so that's starting to come alive. It's starting to get a little bit more interesting. What we want to do now is start to look at getting some more detail in there in the fur. So I know we haven't done the eyes yet, but we'll get to those. This is the hard Rembrandt pastel that I talked about before. It's that browny sort of earthy mid colour. I'm just going to start to use the end of that to get some of the hairy feeling that I want to get. See how the dark, the forehead or the nose area, the middle section of the head is dark, and then it looks like it's got lighter hair over the top of it. So that's the feeling I'm trying to create now with this harder pastel. Just using the end of it and doing little light squiggly marks like this, hopefully it's going to start to look like the fur. Okay, and I'm not pressing very hard. I'm just kind of holding it there and running it up and down, not even lifting it off the page, actually. I'm just doing little zigzaggy sort of shapes to try and make it look a bit fluffy or furry. Okay, and we kind of want to merge those lights into the darks a little bit. So you kind of want to blend them together slightly, not with your fingers, just with your pastel. But see that the light areas around the eyes where it merges then into the forehead that's darker. So using this lovely little mid-tone colour and doing these little hairy kind of movements, we'll sort of knit them together nicely, hopefully. And we can still see those tones underneath. Like that. And of course, everyone will have different coloured pastels, so your colours might not look exactly the same as mine and vice versa. So it just depends what's in your palette as to what colours you can use to do this with, to do all of it with. Now, while I've got this in my hand, I'm just noticing, see how we did the light area around the nose before? So the top light area to the sort of left and the right has got more of that orangey tinge to it. And this seems to be a good match for that. So I'm just going to pop that down either side of the nose. So over the creamy colour I did earlier, which keeps it light. So that's good. Gives it that nice light tone. But I can put this brownish kind of mid-tone over it and it just creates that nice colour that I was looking for. And I'm going to put a bit of that in the back here too, because I can see some of that just down through there. So you can kind of dance around your painting as you go. You sort of think, oh, while I've got this colour in my hand, I might stick some of it over here and over there. And you just keep kind of fiddling around with your colours until they all sort of merge in together nicely. Now, because I've done all these little tiny zigzaggy lines to create fur, I've got lots and lots of dust sitting on the page there. So when you do this sort of work, it seems to pick up, I don't know, the colour that's already down and creates dust. So it picks up the pigment basically that's on the paper already. And again, depending on what kind of pastel you've got will depend on how they behave together. because this is a harder pastel. So it's sort of, it's almost putting little dints in the soft pastel, which is kind of fun because that again helps with the texture. You know, all these things contribute. And if they're not working, then you can just kind of blend them in or push it in and start again. Or carry on, you know, with other colours and things. So if you have pencils, you might find that's easier to do all these little marks with. I have pencils, I just can't be bothered going and getting them, to be honest. And some of us won't. So I think it's better if we do it, if I show you what I'm doing with my pastels, because we don't all have pencils. That's another luxury, really, to have big sets of pencils. So to be able to do this with pastel is another skill, isn't it? It's just something else you can learn to do. I'm just putting a bit more of my dark grey in there. I feel like I wanted to add some more of the grey in there just to get some more dark back in. And back up around that ear there. That's not dark enough. Don't you hate that when you think it's going to be dark enough and then it's not? So you've got to go back in again with another dark. That's okay. So again, remember we used blue violet or your darkest one before. Dark blue would be lovely actually in this, because blue and brown are complementary and they'd be really nice together. So even a really dark blue would be lovely for your darks. Well, through the nose here, those lovely grey kind of tones, blues would be beautiful. So now I'm just using my blue violet very lightly to get a bit more of that texture going on through there. And just on its side, I've got a little short stumpy bit. And so I'm lying it down now on its side and it's giving me a looser sort of mark. So not those sharp, short, hairy sort of marks, but a looser, softer mark down through there. And then see on the left of the nose and above in between the eyes, there's a little bit more light, sort of a light grey kind of colour. So I'm just going to smush a bit of that in there. Again, I'm just using the pastel on its side, just through here, because I don't want a hard line. I just want a soft, sort of furry smush of colour. And see that colour there on the nose, you can see there's a lighter grey just down through there, and same up through here. So I'm just going to put a bit of that through here too. Just press lightly so that you can still see the colours underneath, but it just gives that extra little bit of shine through that bit there. Lovely. And then a bit through here. And a bit over in the ears. I'm just going to go back in there and blur that off a little bit. A bit more of my mid sort of grey in there. So I know then I'll put my lights on and they'll pop a bit more. So just always dancing around, testing, checking, looking at under the eye. So now we've got to get into the eyes and the nose in a sec. I've got way too much dust on there. So I'm just going to tip that off. Try not to blow it. If you blow it, it goes everywhere. Oops, dog heard that. She's come out to see what's happening. Okay, now I've just noticed on the nose, because it's quite black, but it's got this little shine on the front of it, and it probably should be a blue. But anyway, let's do this nose. We've already put blue violet there, and I now want to use my black to make it nice and dark. Okay, so this is a short stumpy bit again. You'll notice most of my pastels are short and stumpy, and that's because I break them or wear them out, or both. But I find it easier to use shorter bits like this when I'm trying to fill in, you know, areas that don't have definite hard lines. So by just popping a bit of colour on there, ooh, that's starting to come together nicely, isn't it? I love it when you put the final lights and darks on and you think, there she is, she's come alive. Okay, so I've just smushed a bit of black on there. What I'm going to do is push that in with my fingers, because this nose is sort of smooth, it's not furry, and I just want to push that in, and that'll help to distinguish it from the fur and also give it a little bit of, I don't know, texture, I guess, body. Okay, oh, yes, now we're talking. Now, as I said, there's a little shine on the top of it there. And I want to get a bit of blue for that because maybe it's reflecting the sky. Usually reflections and shines will be reflecting whatever is around them. So if this little fella is out in the world, in the air, in the forest or somewhere, there could be quite possibly lots of blue sky around, or green trees, who knows, could be a green reflection. So I'm just darkening off where the nostrils are. I can't see them that clearly, but I'm just going to make a darker mark there because it's a bit hard to see on the screen. But I'm going to get a bit of light blue and put a shine on that nose. Sky blue. Sky blue. Don't want it too light because we still want to save our lights for all the other bits and bobs. But this is a nice little sky blue kind of colour. So I'm going to just gently put that on there. It's amazing what a difference this will make to bring this little nose alive. And then see under the nostril, we've got this sort of shape around there. So just very lightly draw a little shape around there. Like that. A bit more maybe. So start off lightly. I always start lightly when I'm putting something down. I'm not too sure, how heavy it needs to be or thick. And then if you need to thicken it up, you can. That's nice. I'm just going to dab it with my finger to soften it off a little bit. Now the front of the nose looks like it's got bumps, little divots and bumps and things on there. So I'm just going to pick up what am I going to do? Pick up this grey, greeny grey colour. Not too light, not too dark. And just dot that around a little bit. Okay, just a few little random dots and then smush it with your finger. Just dab it, don't rub it. Just dab it gently a few times and that'll kind of push them in, but still give a little bit of texture. Nice, that's looking all right. Now, see at the top of the nose, we're getting into the detail now. The top of the nose, around here, there's a little light kind of line. So if you use your mid-grey or something like a grey, don't go white because it's not that white, but we just want to have a lightish line across the top of the nose there to kind of distinguish it from the skin. And start off nice and lightly with the edge of your pastel, and then or a pencil if you have any, and just do a kind of a broken line. You don't want a strong hard line because it's not that defined in the picture. So we just want to do a soft little line like that around there, and then maybe I might use that down here just to show the nostril a bit better. There, that's starting to look like a thing now. Cool. All right. And then down through here, a bit more white. Well, that should be lighter actually. Stop it, Jeannie. I'm fiddling now. Bit more light down here under the nose. See that little bit of white light fur there? I'm not using white. This is my not quite white colour. I don't want it to be too bright. That's nice. Ooh, that's come alive nicely, hasn't it? Just going to pop a bit more blue there. Blue's lovely, especially with your browns. Yeah. Okay. Now, the other thing I just realised or noticed was we have kind of a lighter, I've got one. This might try this one. This is my lighter orangey brown, just up around the nose here, just to define that a little bit more, just at the sides around there. Like that. Okay, that'll do for noses for now, I think. Soften off the edge of that. There's no hard edges on this. It's all kind of soft and blurry. Lovely. So it's amazing what a little bit of blue will do. If you're looking for a shine, especially on a black nose or even in eyes, actually, the eyes also have a bit of blue in them. It's amazing what a touch of blue will do. So, yeah, white and cream are not always the answers. Sometimes other colours will work. And again, it's about the tone, isn't it? So that blue's a lighter tone, and that's why it works really well. Lovely. Okay, let's go to the eyes. Let's do the fun bit now. All right, so the eyes are sort of sunk into the head, so we really need to do the eyeball bit first, and then we can do the bits around it, the skin and the tear ducts and stuff. So I'm going to put black on there because I want the eyes to really pop. They're the things that we see first. And if I want to get some shine, some white shine in there, then the black will give me the most drama, I think. So pick up your black. I know they're not black, they're brown. If you've already got brown down on there, then by the time we kind of push this around, you'll get your brown eyes, your dark brown eyes. Okay. And on the other side, so I might as well do them both at the same time. I'm just going to put a nice big blob of black on there. Next thing we want to do is kind of push them in. Because the eyes are really glossy, we want to blend them in so that they're lovely and smooth. Okay, so be careful because if you've got big chunky fingers, they might smush it out too much. So just go gently. Usually the ring finger is a good one because it's not too big. The hardest part is seeing what you're doing over your hand half the time. If you go a little bit too big, don't stress, on the skin side because we're going to put the skin around them anyway. So see how by blending those in with the brown that was underneath, they're not too black now, but they're still nice and dark, and that's what we wanted, that lovely dark. I've got a lovely dark finger. I'll just pop a bit of that up there while I've got it. So try not to waste anything. If you've got, colour on your finger that you can use somewhere, by all means do. Okay, so we've got these lovely dark eyeballs. Ooh. Let me just tip off my dust a bit. So now we can put some light in there and they're really going to pop. This is the funnest part. Okay, but first we need to look at the edge of the eyes. So see in, where's the pencil? See in here, this is inside sort of the skin of the eye, around through there. So if you have a pencil, try to just kind of refine the edges a little bit. This is a white pencil, but I'm not pressing very hard, so it's not coming out too white. It's sort of almost working like a blender and picking up the other colour underneath. And because I put that pinky sort of brown colour in earlier, even though it was a bit too dark, if I'm using this white or a light colour and just very gently pushing that in, it's blending with the pinky colour underneath it, so it's starting to look more pink. Now, if I press harder, I can make it whiter, but I don't want to, so I'm just going to press nice and light. If you don't have a pencil, you can try this with a pastel, but you just need to make sure you have a fairly hard edge on the tip of your pastel. So this is my creamy one I've been using. So it's not impossible to use your pastels. You can get some really nice sharp edges with those. You've just got to be quite careful about where you put it and just press lightly. Okay, so that's now given me the inside of the eye, sort of around the tear duct sort of area that I wanted. And coming up, if you look at the skin around up here, above the eye, it's got like a little eyelid that sort of pops out just a tiny bit outside the side of the face. So I'm using my cream just to pop that in there. It's just a little shape that comes out over the top like that. And then we can bring the eyelashes out from there. Okay, so this is the detail bit. This is where you really want to notice your colours and your shapes and what's going on. Now see down here, just show you again with the pencil. In this section here, on the left of the bottom of the eye, on the edge of the face, we've got this kind of dark grey section in there. So that's almost like the bottom of the eyelid that sort of pops out a little bit and nests the eye inside it. So this bit here is a dark colour. Now, if you look at the colour of that compared to the background, it's darker, isn't it? So we need to darken that tiny little section off in there. Now, if you can't get to it with a pastel, try charcoal. Charcoal, that's about the right colour actually. So charcoal, you can usually get a finer line with some charcoal. So don't be afraid to use charcoal with pastel. They work really nicely together. A bit too much now. What do I want to tip off the dust first? Okay, so I can see that that grey colour kind of comes around into the tear duct as well, down through here. It's like a shadow sort of tone down through into there. Lovely. And then if you went outside the lines, like I did a little bit there, I'm just going to dab that with my eraser. Try and get a little bit of that off. And try not to lift up whatever is underneath it. Okay. Okay. Now, I need to just thin that out a little bit there. So just noticing your shapes. So this little section, we've got a kind of a grey area on the edge of the eye, and then as it comes around under the front of the eye, it gets lighter in there. So I'm just using my white pencil again, but I'm not pressing too hard. So I'm still trying to keep it light without going white. And then down into here, it's lighter. There we go. That's nearly right. See how we've created a bit of a shadow down through there where the charcoal went? And then in this section here, it's a tad lighter. So we're creating some form. What we want to do is create form. We want to make it look like the eyes coming out of the eye socket, basically. And we'll be able to achieve that in a second with some shine. I'm just thinking I might need a black pencil to define the very edge of the eye over here as it comes out. Charcoal's probably not dark enough, but that's the sort of thing I want to do, is just to bulge it out a little bit more. If you've got a really dark brown pastel for the eye, that'd be awesome too. So you might find black's too dark, but a darkest, really dark brown would be good. Okay, so we'll leave that eye there for now, and we'll go and do the same sort of thing over on the other side while we're still thinking about it. So pick up my white again and just start to sort of gently, softly blur off this reddy brown colour, because it's, if you look closely, you can see it's kind of lighter in the tear duct bit in here. And then we come around and we've got a little light bit. You might have to wipe off your pencil every now and again just to make it clean again. Little light bit through there. That's too white, but I can quieten that down. And then it comes up through here. So just checking the shape of the eye and how that eye sits inside this area. And then, of course, we've got that grey again down underneath, like on the other side. It's almost like an eyeliner across the bottom of the eye there. And then it comes down, using charcoal again, into that little tear duct kind of shape there. It's a bit too much, but anyway. I'll just cover up that white little bit with my charcoal to soften that off. And then trying to find the right colour. Try this little reddy brown. Colour to get some of that happening through there. Okay, so that's a bit too bright. What else can we do? Use this one. So it's all trial and error, isn't it? You just see, oh, that colour's not quite right. And because we don't mix colours in a palette, you kind of got to find them and mix them on the paper and then push them together and see how you go. So practice helps when you're finding different colours, and the softness of your movement, all those things contribute to that. Okay. All right, that's looking all right. The shine will make it pop, you watch. Okay, tip off my dust. Eyelashes and the shine, the little details, that's what's going to bring it to life. All right, so we've got these lovely big dark eyeballs, gorgeous, popping out of there. Bring that around like that a little bit more. So pastels are tricky when you're doing detail, but I love the challenge. And the good thing is you can kind of go over it and over it and over it until you get it how you want it. You know, and you can vary how hard you press that. It's just so so nice to use. You can really create some beautiful art with your pastels. Okay, let's get some shine in these eyes. So, as I said before, I can see blue in there. It's like sky or maybe trees, I don't know. But let's have a play with the blue. If you have a pencil, you might find it easier. I'm just going to use the edge of my pastel and just literally blob it on. So don't press it in, or yeah, press it, but sort of lift it off again if you can. Okay, so that's that little blue reflection up on the top of the eye on the left, and then we've got another little one over here on the right. Just a couple of little blue spots, and we'll use white for the other bits. Okay, so see, she's coming alive already. I can feel her. All right, so we've got a bit of blue there, and then we're going to put some, there's actually, if you want to try, I don't know how dark your eyes are, but if you want to, see there's a little, like you can see the pupil, or the dark pupil. So if you have black, just pop a bit of a black line through there to indicate that. You might not be able to see it depending again on how dark your eyes are, but it doesn't have to be really obvious because it's not in the picture either. But you just want to maybe put a little bit of black through there to indicate the pupils. I'm just going to tip off my dust again. That's the most annoying bit, is the dust. Okay, now let's get some shine in here. Now let's have a look. Is that really white? I'm going to go with my cream first. And if it's not white enough, then I can go over it. But I'm going to start off with that because it might be light enough now. The shine on the off the cream or white colour kind of is a line, but it's a broken line running across the front here, a bit like that. Might be too bright. If it is, just dab it with your finger. And then over on this side, on the other side, we've got like a line running across there too. I think you can nearly see the person taking the photo in that reflection. Okay. And so if you feel that's too strong, and when you first do it, you think, oh, that looks weird, but walk away and come back and it'll make more sense. But if it feels too strong, just give it a little dab to soften it off a bit. If you want it brighter, just add some white or a bit more over the top. So I can put a bit of white. Pencil would be better if you have one. Pencil, charcoal pencil. This is white charcoal. Love it, love it, love it. Best thing ever. Sometimes the white charcoal sticks better than the actual pastel. There we go. And then there's a slight little line just down through there. So this is when you start to see all the little details. Don't overdo it though, because if you overdo it, you'll wreck it. You just want to keep it really minimal. There we go. Now all she needs is some eyelashes. So again, if you have a black pencil, that would be really helpful. If not, you can use your pastels. You just got to find the sharp edge, and you might want to practice first. So you get a bit of scrap paper or your drawing from before, and you can just find the sharp edge. So see, that's the sharp edge of the pastel. So if I do that, I can get these lovely soft edges. You might have to keep twisting it around because it goes kind of blunt and flat, but see how I can get those lovely soft lashes. So have a little practice if you've got your paper nearby first, because it's kind of scary when you do this bit. It's the final bit. And you can get them off, but it's a pain in the bum or neck. So just have a practice with that and see how you feel about using the edge of your pastel. If you don't want to do that and you've got pencils handy or charcoal, I don't think charcoal is going to be strong enough. It's a little bit too, see how it's kind of softer. You're not going to get a really strong line with your charcoal unless it's a hard charcoal. So try it with the edge of your pastel stick or use a pencil. So I'm going to go with the pastel. Let's see how we go. So next thing you want to look at is the direction of these little hairs that are coming out of the eyes and around the eyes. So we've got a couple up here. So I'm just going to do a couple that sort of spring from here. So what you want to do is start where the hair comes from and then pull it out in the direction it grows and then lift it off. So it's like a soft end. So you don't want a hard, sharp finish to it. You sort of want to lift it off gently. So I know that sounds crazy, but let's try it. So we're going to have one coming over like that. Didn't go quite far enough. That's all right. And then a few coming up into the ear. I think pencils would be way better if you have one. Just got to find a sharp edge. And then coming over there and up there. So these are all quite subtle. And see where I started that, it's a little bit too hard or a bit too thick. Now I can soften those off with my fingers. I'll just dab it in afterwards, but I'm just going to do a few more little marks like that. And then see the eyelashes coming out of the eye here. Ooh, they're going to be tricky. They all kind of go sort of straight, and there's a cluster of them just here. So bear with me while I try and do that. And then we've got a couple of longish ones that pop out of there too. Something like that. And then there's some shorter ones that come across the front, which you can't really see in front of the eye there. Some little wispy ones around there. So that's okay. I prefer a finer line if I had pencils next to me, but I'll do it with pastels because you might not have pencils. So, and then down the bottom, we've got a few little ones that pop out from there. And then you've got these long couple of little wispy ones that come out to the side. And then down the bottom here. It's amazing. She's got quite a lot of lashes. Something like that. So if you find, for instance, see where I began these ones up here coming out of the head. If you think that's a bit too heavy or thick, just grab your light pastel that you used in there before and just sort of smush that around a little bit so that you're starting to blend in the ends of the eyelashes so they don't look like they're all just starting on the surface. They're underneath the softer hair. So you might have to fiddle a little bit with that sort of thing just to soften off the edges and refine them a little bit more. I think she looks all right. So now we're going to pop over to the other side and do the same sort of thing. So again, I'm going to try and you've got to start in the hair. I'm going to flip her around because I'm left-handed, so I've got to come this way. It's easier for me to do it this way than across the page. So I'm just going to fling up some of those. These come up into the ear like this. So just softly, softly. Don't go too crazy. And then I can come back down. Yeah, sometimes you've got to flip things around so you can get the right angle. And then we've got the eyelashes coming out of the eye here. So this one, again, we've got this little cluster that sort of pops out here. Now, if you want to pop a background in afterwards, then you might need to redo these when you've done the background. That's okay, quite possible. All right, so that's that little eyelash there, might be a bit too much. And then we've got tiny little ones just on the bottom here, popping out softly, softly, and then a few little random ones coming out down there. How far down do they go? Oh, there's quite a long one, isn't there? It goes nearly down to the nose. Goodness me. Okay. So it's hard to get those fine lines with the pastel. They're a bit too much, aren't they? And then down around the nose, you can do a few little wispy ones down through there. So see how they just sort of all pop out from the edge like that. So in where I've made those too thick, I think I'll probably just take some of those out or lift them off with the kneadable eraser just to lighten them up a bit, or you can remove them. But I think she looks all right. And then you can take off your grid lines with your kneadable eraser. So because they're in charcoal, they'll come off really easy if they're in charcoal. If you use pencil, just make sure you don't press very hard, and it's easier to get it off. There we go. I'll have to redo those lashes. I think they're a bit too chunky. So pencils come in handy, and if you can only ever afford a couple, get yourself a black one and a white one, and maybe like a skid tone or something in between, mid-range. Depends what you paint too. If you like to do animals, then you might want to invest in some pencils. They are wonderful to have. I like Faber-Castell. They're my go-tos. They're quite nice. Just trying to get some of this off now. I'll lighten it up a little bit. Anyway, there is our deer, my dear. And I think, yeah, hopefully you've had a nice class and enjoyed that. And of course, you can come back over it and just refine your shapes a little bit, check everything, make sure you've got all the right tones and colours, that you've got light against dark and dark against light, and everything sort of stands out. I'm just noticing around here it needs to be a tad wider with a little bit of white or light on the edges, just so it sticks out from the background a bit more. So all those little things you can refine, but it's amazing how much the eyes just come alive when you put that shine in there, isn't it? It's all about the shine and the shape of the shine too. So it needs to be kind of rounded in the direction of the eyes to get that feeling of fullness. Don't forget to sign your artwork as well. So again, a charcoal pencil is a good option, or a pastel pencil, and you can do it anywhere you like on your picture. I usually try and do it bottom right, but it doesn't really matter. And I hope you've enjoyed today's class. And as I said, this is the last online class for now. I'm never going to say never, because you never know. Things change, and they might happen again. We'll see what happens. Yeah, as I said, never say never. Just thinking that eye needs to be a bit taller. Anyway, you can fiddle till the cows come home, or the deer, whichever you prefer. So thank you for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed the class. If you want to do any more, there'll be plenty online videos to do, and I will endeavour to make more of those going forward and have them available on my website. So cheerio for now, and have a great day.